Welcome. Welcome to P&P Live. I'm Heidi Ashton Yoon from the Children and Teens Department at Politics and Prose, and I'd like to thank you all for joining us in this new format where we can continue to bring you the author events we're known for just now from the comfort of your home. At any time during the event, you can click the green Buy the Book button to get your own copy of They Went Left, and we will ship it free of charge directly to your home. As you know, small businesses and especially independent bookstores are getting hit especially hard right now, but we're so thankful that loyal customers like all of you will keep us in business and keep our spirits afloat. Tonight, you can ask a question by clicking on the Ask a Question button, which can be found near the bottom of your screen. You can also read other people's questions and even vote for the ones that you'd like to hear answered the most. Now on to tonight's event. 2 years ago, I had the pleasure of sharing dinner with Monica Hesse during a book conference in New Orleans. Although she was there to talk about her new book, The War Outside, she was more interested in asking us questions, learning our interests, and enjoying our connections. Her curiosity and interest in people is evident in all of her work, from her historical fiction books for young adults, such as the Edgar Award-winning Girl in the Blue Coat, to her work as a columnist for the Washington Post. Tonight, she's here to talk about They Went Left, a book that addresses the question of those who were liberated from the concentration camps during World War II and how they went on living their lives after just having such unspeakable horror happen to them. Monica is joining conversation tonight with Justine Kenin. She's a producer and editor for NPR's All Things Considered. Justine is a dedicated writer, reader, and supporter of children's literature. And with that, I'll turn the conversation over to them.
Thank you, Heidi.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to meet Monica. This is so surreal because when we were first asked to do this, we were going to be in person and be at Politics and Prose and have a room full of people. But I'm glad we are able to move ahead and have an online virtual room. And we can't wait to hear your questions. And I loved this book. Once again, you've created just this amazing world and character. And so why don't you tell us a little bit about Zofia and the main character in this book, and sort of her life before the war.
Yes.
You can start there.
I will start there. I'm going to actually start before there, though, to just say thank you for doing this and thank all of you who we can't see for doing this. I hope you're in your pajamas and cozy as you wouldn't be able to be in person. And I also felt that I should tell you that what I've learned about everyone's living rooms from watching a lot of CNN, and now we get to see newscasters in their living rooms. What I've learned is that you are always supposed to have a bookshelf behind you and a plant next to you. So I've arranged this for you. This is not what my room normally looks like, but I feel like I'm properly obeying the rules of online interviews, right?
Okay. Nailing it. You're nailing it. Yeah, okay. For sure.
So They Went Left is about a young woman named Zofia Lederman who goes searching for her younger brother after the war, after she's been liberated from a series of concentration camps. Before the war, which I think is what you asked about, she was living a fairly normal life in Sosnowiec, Poland, which is a real mid-sized industrial city. Think of it like Detroit. It's like the Detroit of Poland. A lot of factory work. Her family owns a small clothing factory where they make custom-made clothes. And Zofia and her younger brother are poised to inherit this factory. And then when the German army invades, their life slowly begins to change. They're forced to leave their apartment. They're forced to move into the Jewish ghetto. And then one day in August of 1942, they are all brought to the soccer stadium, which had been this place of joy, and they are divided into lines, and those lines kind of define the rest of their lives.
Yeah, and these characters are so amazing. This is your third World War II era book, as Maria notes, who's got a question already. And she says, she asked a question I also have, which is, what is it? Why World War II? What keeps drawing you to this particular time?
I think that not to draw too many parallels to today, but what always interests me about World War II is it was a global event. And it was a global event in which, depending on where you lived, you were having a radically different experience, but there wasn't a corner of the globe that was untouched by it. So for my first book, I wanted to explore life in an occupied country, and that's why it's set in the Netherlands in 1943. For my second book, oh, look at, you're so prepared. You're so prepared. My second book is set in Texas in 1944, and it's about the internment camps that we had here in the United States. But one thing that I had noticed is that most of the books that I had read ended with 1945, and so I wanted to write a book that explored the aftermath, not the part where everything was torn asunder, but where we had to figure out how to put the world back together again.
And tell us why Zofia's story. Tell us about sort of assembling some of the parts of her story. Poland, you could have sort of gone a lot of places, and her family being in the sort of industrial area. What in particular was it about Zofia that you just had to tell? You went to this town, right, where she was from,
a long time ago. Yeah. But the name always really stuck in my head. I went there. And
tell us the name again. Just
Sosnowiec.
Thank you.
Yes. So I was on a really somber vacation years ago when I was in college. It was technically spring break, but I was traveling with a friend. We visited Auschwitz. We were visiting all of these really somber historical sites. And I was thinking about how here I am on this decadent passenger train meandering through the Czech Republic and Poland and Germany and just thinking about the trains that passed there 60 or 70 years prior and what that looked like. And one of the places that my train stopped was Sosnowiec. So I do an insane amount of research. I think that people, like, if you write historical fiction, you love research, but like I really love research.
Gabby wants to hear about this. Gabby asked a question. Yeah. She says, tell us about your writing and research process.
Yeah. So I'm really lucky to live in Washington, D.C., as I'm sure a lot of viewers are. The United States Holocaust Memorial Museum is just a treasure. And so I spend a lot of time. I didn't have to spend as much time there in person for this book because so many of their resources are online. So I listened to hours and hours of oral histories. And once I had decided I wanted to focus on Sosnowiec, I was looking at census records and databases and what life was like there, and using Google Maps so that I could kind of stroll through the neighborhood and decide what Zofia's route would have been like to go from work to home. So I do a lot of research, but going back to your previous answer, Zofia is not taken from any one person, but her experiences are very representative of what an 18-year-old girl living in Sosnowiec would have been doing, where she would have been going, how she would have been working. She felt immediately real to me. And
she does to the reader. So she's amazing. Let's talk a little bit about sewing and her, as you said, her family has a small factory manufacturing clothes, right? Am I getting that right?
Yeah.
And so something she sort of does before the war, something she does at home. It's sort of it's of its era also, right? A young girl sewing a lot, but she's super skilled at it. And this is sort of a key component to not only her life and her ability for herself to survive the war, but also something that she creates for her very young brother, Abek. Tell us about both of those things.
Yeah, so sewing for me has really happy connotations. I think I'm not a seamstress myself. My mother is, and actually, I think my mom is probably on this chat now somewhere. But she sewed a lot. She made all of our Halloween costumes and our pajamas and Christmas dresses and things like that. So for me, the sound of a sewing machine has really happy memories of childhood, and I thought it would be that way for Zofia too. And and in a way, in the book, it really becomes her way to find herself again. Mm-hmm. It's a grounding skill that she can use to find her way back to her family. And without giving away too much, it's important in a lot of ways.
It helps her sort of, it's a skill she's able to utilize throughout the war as she sort of survives the camps.
Yeah. So it had been, she'd been accomplished and skilled since she was very young. And then part of what allows her to survive the camps is because the Nazis come looking in Auschwitz for young women who are skilled seamstresses to be transferred to a factory where they will help make German uniforms and backpacks, which is a real path that some young women from Sosnowiec took, is being transferred from these various camps. So it becomes something that she uses to survive, and then it's something that she rediscovers her passion for and uses it to tell her own story and the story of others.
Great. So we meet her in the beginning of the book. She's sort of this shell, right? It's the very end of the war, and she's emerging from a hospital. She's super raw, and she's just trying to like take one step after another to reunite with her brother. This is like her mission when the book starts. And then she ends up in sort of a refugee camp and meets, other people her age. And there's just some delightful characters there. And I love if you could, I think you have your book. You can read page 121. Bryna, is that this young woman she meets?
Yes.
And it's this. What I love that you do here is that they are. Yes, it's tragic. Yes, they're survivors of this war, but like they're kids, really. I mean, they're 18 or they're coming to life, right? It just feels like these little seeds that just are, finally reaching for some sun. And it's just beautiful. So I want you to just give us a little bit of Bryna.
I'm really glad that you asked me to read this. Bryna is actually my favorite character in the book. And this is a scene in which Bryna has just told Zofia that she's planning to marry her fiancé, Chaim, who she has only known for 5 weeks. 5 weeks? 5 weeks is nothing. 5 weeks ago, I was still in the hospital. We met here, she continues, plowing a field. Isn't that romantic? But I say, I don't mean to make judgments, but you barely know each other. I'm afraid Bryna will be angry with me for puncturing her happiness, but instead she leans forward in her chair, stretching out a hand until I take it. Chaim and I have known each other for 5 weeks. I knew my last fiancé, Wolf, for 2 years. We didn't have a wedding because we wanted to wait until the war was over, and every day I think about how I'd change that if I could. So now I'll have a wedding, and it'll be with Chaim and not with Wolf. And I'm sure a small part of Chaim wishes his wedding would be with the girl he loved in Hungary before me, who died and whose picture he keeps that he thinks I don't know about. I start to apologize, but she cuts me off with a shake of her head. Today, I am choosing to love the person in front of me. Do you understand? Because he's here, I'm here, and we're ready to not be lonely together. He's a good man. I won't let another wedding pass me by.
I love that scene. I can't. It's so great. What does Zofia learn from Bryna and a lot of the folks she meets are sort of like a few months or weeks ahead of her in terms of where they are and getting out of a camp or getting out of a hospital. What does she learn from her and these other young folks?
Yeah, I never write books thinking, and the theme of this book will be blah. But when I wrote that scene and going back to it, Bryna telling Zofia to choose to love really becomes the theme of the book, because the theme is about choosing family. It's about choosing friends. It's about choosing to build a world out of rubble. And in a broader sense, it's about the idea that we have no control over the terrible things that happen to us. And the only scrap of control we have is how we can choose to move forward. And Bryna is just, the most practical optimist, and she's relentlessly moving forward and choosing to take these leaps of happiness that might be ill-advised, but like she's gonna make the best of things anyway.
Love it. Yeah, she's so great, and that whole sort of world that they create there is so great. I'm trying to get to some questions. I'm having a little trouble scrolling. I'm going to do my best here. Somebody asked you, and I saw the question, but I can't quite get to it back, which is about writing in first person and your decision to write in first person and how you do that.
Yeah, it's weird because I wish that I had a really reasoned, thoughtful discussion for why I chose to do it. But it never feels like a choice. It feels like if I'm going to truly inhabit these characters, this is the way to write. And especially with Zofia, I think more than any character I've ever written, she just came to me fully formed. It was like she was in my head. I knew her voice. I knew what she wanted to say, and first person felt like the only way to honor that.
And I should say, like, you do this amazing job of like, like I said, it's the very end of the war. No surprise. She's sort of, barely holding it together, just one foot in front of the other. She opens up and up, and it's so well done. Somebody has another question. Carolyn Royce asks, in terms of your books, you sort of generally, do you start with the incredible twists that each of your books has, or is there a different way that you write? Like, do you know where it's going to go? Do you map it all out? I think is what she's asking. Or do you just sort of go with the flow?
Yeah, I almost always write the last chapter first. I
really?
Almost always write, or not the very last chapter, but toward the end. So like for me, as I'm writing, the mystery I'm trying to solve isn't what happened, but why it happened. Like I start with the sort of what in my mind is the pinnacle scene, and then I'm trying to work backwards and figuring out who are these characters and how would they have gotten to this place, and why would it matter to them to be in this place. So yeah, I write the last chapter first, and then I kind of work back.
And this was hard, these characters, and Bryna is maybe a nice counterpoint to some of them, but they're so locked in from having to be so self-protective from so many years of war, of so many of the characters.
Yeah. Everyone in this story has a secret, and I don't mean that in a malevolent way, but like everyone is hiding something that they have had to hide for their own survival, for their own well-being, for their own sanity. Zofia is hiding things from herself. We're learning secrets about Zofia as she's learning them about herself. And I thought that Zofia would not know a lot about PTSD, but it's obvious that she and everyone else is dealing with that in some way.
Yeah. No, you do it that really beautifully. It feels like super authentic. Okay, I'm going to try this. I'm going to close the questions again and open them again. I'm just having weird scrolling issues, but I want to get to them.
Okay. Let me know if you want me to try.
Okay. Somebody asked about your, as a non-Jewish woman, are you ever worried about the accuracy of your books and sort of representing Judaism?
Yes, every single day, like an unqualified yes, absolutely. So I look at this a couple of different ways. First, I'm trained as a journalist. That's been my day job for more than a decade. And if I didn't think it was possible to write with nuance and compassion about people unlike myself, I wouldn't believe in the mission of journalism to begin with, because that's the job is to constantly try to understand in a real and respectful way what other people are going through. I'll also say I would never write. I would never write a contemporary novel starring with a Jewish protagonist, because those experiences are ongoing. And I think that writing about them now requires the lived experience of being in that body, of being in that world now. The the benefit of historical fiction is that we are writing about events that are finished, and that we have had decades and years to gather primary sources for,
Right.
to have a wealth of knowledge for, to have, again, to have oral histories for, to have a lot of first-person memoirs. And so I felt that I could use a lot of my journalistic training
Right.
to encompass what life was like in this very specific moment of Poland in 1945 in a way that I would never try to do in a more generalized sense.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, similarly, your other books have also taken on other characters who are not you. I mean, so
yeah. I mean, I think that I think that you just have to be so careful and so eager and interested in learning and getting it right. And I think that the bar is and should be high for that.
Pam asks, why do you prefer writing YA novels? Is there something about writing for younger readers that provides more freedom, or do you just prefer an audience of young people? And I will say, as somebody who's not a young person, I don't feel like these are exclusive to young people. I absolutely treasure these books, and I don't know that anyway, I'm curious what you wanted to say.
You know, when I first started to write Girl in the Blue Coat, I didn't think of it as being YA, and it was only a few chapters in that I had shown it to my agent, and she said, "I think that this is YA." And even now, when people ask me what the difference is, it's really I mean, it's really hard to put my finger on. I write. I obviously write for adults too. I've written a true crime novel that was for adults. I write columns for the Post that I think have more adult readers. If I'm asked to pinpoint what I think the difference is between teen readers and adult readers, I think that teenagers' emotions are much more close to the surface. I think that their hearts are much more accessible, and they feel things in a way that is really open and beautiful. And so writing YA, I get to access all of that, and I like that. But other than that, no, there's not a big difference.
Do you sort of wake up surprised sometimes, like, wait, I'm a YA writer? How did that come to be as like a sort of a stamp?
I mean, it's sort of the last. First of all, I never thought that I would be able to write like a single novel to begin with, and if I did, I wouldn't have thought it would be YA. But the field of YA historical fiction is what I loved to read when I was young, and it makes sense to write now.
Somebody has a Girl in the Blue Coat question. I just read Girl in the Blue Coat, and I thought the book was a lot about friendship. And I was wondering about Hanneke and Elspeth. I hope I'm saying their names somewhat correctly. Miriam forgave Amalia for revealing her hiding spot, even when for her hiding spot. Why did Hanneke not try with Elspeth? She was even in her house. Was there a certain reason you didn't have them reconnect?
Oh my, okay.
That's from Addie.
Major spoilers if you haven't read that book.
Well, it's not the new book, so I felt like it's been
I just think that's real life. That sometimes we don't make up with people, and sometimes people do things that we decide are unforgivable. And I think Hanneke thought that Elspeth marrying a German soldier, marrying a member of the oppressors, was not forgivable. And it didn't matter how much Elspeth had made her laugh, or how she had comforted her, how close they were. There's a certain point at which you can love someone as a person, but if you can't abide by their morals, it's really hard. It's really hard to save that friendship.
Somebody asked a good question that sort of applies to a lot of these, like World War II era, and I'm scrolling down for her name. Oops, scrolling. Catherine, which is, how do you decide about sort of what level of violence to allow into these books? And she pointed in particular to Girl in the Blue Coat. especially because it is like a YA book.
Yeah, again, I didn't screen. I think I know the scene she's talking about. I didn't pull back and write that less violently than I wanted to. If it had been an adult novel, I would have written with the same level of violence. I think it is extremely hard in writing, especially about the Holocaust, because there's no way to exaggerate the violence, like the cruelty and the torture that happened. There's nothing that an author could imagine that is worse than what actually happened. And in fact, you read as an author, I'm trying to communicate what actually happened in a way that that always serves a purpose, in a way that doesn't feel egregious isn't the right word. Gratuitous or like we're just leering at it. It should always serve the story. It shouldn't be that we just want to ogle at someone's suffering. Right. Yeah.
I mean, is that also part of the freedom of writing about it as an era that's past, that's historical fiction? People know what they're getting into. You pick up the book, it's a World War II era book. Okay, well, I know generally, and this is set in time of war, does that give you a certain freedom to say, the table is set, this is World War II, so come on in.
Yeah, I think so. But I also think that, World War II has been written about so much, and it's so easy to think that you know everything about it. And so I'm always trying to find stories that that we haven't considered before, perspectives that we haven't considered before, characters who are LGBT, or characters who represent populations that we don't think of as playing big roles in World War II. So yeah, I think that there's a framework where you know a little bit what you're expecting, but I hope that you're reconsidering the period and learning new things too.
I mean, as a reader, I will say for sure, I think you nailed that, like constantly, like these characters are so fresh, are, so well imagined, and they're, and so real at the same time. So, as a totally biased reader, I will say, yes, you do that.
You can totally
biased. Let's see. Oh yeah. So we do have some people wanting to know some writer questions, which I love asking and I love hearing. What is your writing process like? Do you have a daily ritual? Do you have a lot of structure? And I would be curious, is like, what's your writing process like for your fiction versus your day job? And when do you do each?
Yes, I mean, I think that they inform each other a lot. I will say that the being a journalist is really good training for being a novelist, because the thing about journalism is that you have a day or maybe two to write something, and then it's out and then it's done, and you don't have control over it anymore. And so you learn to be really fast and as precise as you can be. And you also learn to not always be very precious about what you're writing. Like you learn that you are never in a newspaper going to write the best thing you can possibly write. You are only going to write the best thing you can write that day. And so when I'm writing novels, I try to have that same level of, I try to give myself daily deadlines. I don't wait until I'm in the mood. I don't labor over a sentence. When I'm doing my first draft, I do 1,000 words a day, rain or shine, like that's it. And when I hit 1,000, if I'm in the middle of a sentence, like I'm done. I hit my word count.
Is that in the morning every day? Do you do that every morning, or is it?
I usually late at night. It's like a 9 p.m. to like 11 p.m. kind of thing. Yeah, but I heard another writer say this, and I've made it my motto, which is it doesn't have to be good yet. It can be good later. Now it just has to be done. And so that's sort of what I try to do, just getting through the first
draft.
Get
it on the page. Yeah. Great. Okay, cool. And what about your research into some of your other books? I mean, you said you relied very heavily on the Holocaust Museum here for this most recent book, They Went Left. But I'd be curious about your other World War II books. We could start with The Girl in the Blue Coat, set in the Netherlands. And this was just like, to me, like having that landscape, like, right, that they were, I just felt like it was so well imagined.
Yeah, so for Girl in the Blue Coat, I actually in part set it in the Netherlands because I knew that because of Anne Frank, there would be a lot of scholarship around the Netherlands that were easily accessible. But I found myself having to do a lot of phone interviews for that one, like because I had some very technical and specific, like there's a subplot about photography. So I had to talk to like historians of photography to tell me what kinds of film would have been available and like how the film projector would have worked then. And if I talked to Dutch naval historians about if this person would have been in this battle, what kind of ship would they have been on and how would they have enrolled and that kind of process.
And that's where your journalism comes in.
Yeah. And I mean, I love anytime I can interview someone about what they know. So that was Girl in the Blue Coat. The War Outside, again, I'm so lucky to live in Washington, D.C. because so many of the records of Japanese American internment camps are located in the National Archives right here in D.C. So I spent a lot of time there just requesting cart after cart of everything from like the menus of what they were serving prisoners in internment camps to like what are the hours of the swimming pool, what books are available in the library. You could really piece together daily life really easily through the documents available.
Nice. And is that your advice to aspiring writers of fiction, just like ground in facts?
I think that when you are writing historical fiction, so I got an email the other day, or not the other day, but I got an email from someone after I had written Girl in the Blue Coat who said, my father was Anne Frank's primary school teacher.
No.
And he never wanted to talk about the war. And I'm glad that I read your book because I feel like I have a better understanding of occupied Amsterdam. Wow. And that made me so glad that I had done the research that I had, that I had found the blueprints for the Jewish school that some of the characters attended, or that I had, really dug into what would have opened when and all of that. Because I think that with historical fiction, you have to remind yourself it's fiction, but you could be writing about someone's father. You could be writing about the experience of someone's grandparents. And so you owe something to your reader, but you owe something to the real people who lived through whatever it is that you're writing about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that book, I mean, right, like our sense as people born, way after the war is Anne Frank, is like this teeny tiny little room, like that was the whole war in the Netherlands. Yeah. And that's what was so amazing about that, is it just, and that is it's and so just like, right, there's this whole other world outside of where she's trying to live, and right, like how's what's going on in that world? That was amazing to me.
Yeah. And I was really interested. I mean, that was the kernel of that book, was thinking about, I've read this book so many times. It was a formative book for me. But almost everything that I know about the war is written from inside this annex. And what was life like for the average Dutch citizens who weren't in the annex.
And she's such a great, saucy main character. I loved her so much. She's
good. I'm glad. Some people didn't. They were
why?
But I really liked her.
What did they not like about her?
Here's what I think is really interesting. So for those of you who haven't read it, Hanneke, the main character of Girl in the Blue Coat, is sort of a reluctant heroine. She gets drawn into the resistance, and she really doesn't want to. It's for sort of selfish reasons. And I think a lot of people thought that they would have been different, like that they would have jumped wholeheartedly into the resistance. But that's one of the things that I think is important to think about, is that these weren't, it wasn't an easy decision to be a hero for some people. They were afraid for their families, they were afraid for their own lives. And so I think that, it's important to wrestle with that moral complexity, with not being ready to jump in immediately.
That reminds me a little of Zofia and her, when she first gets, like, one of the first places she lands, you meet her, she's like leaving this hospital, and she's like, I'm going home. I'm going to, she gets to her apartment that her family had lived in. And let's tell about the neighbor.
So
she was not as she expected.
She comes home and she runs into this neighbor. And at first she's just overjoyed to see a familiar face, someone that she knew from before, someone that she grew up living next door to. And instead the neighbor says something like, I didn't think any of you would be back. And Zofia understands that she's not saying that in a grateful way. She's saying that, like, I hoped none of you would be back.
And it's sort of a you people, like,
yeah.
And then in her,
and then later, when Zofia returns to her apartment, the neighbor has planted a small swastika flag in her planter. And I mean, I included that detail for specific reasons, because again, when people were coming home after the war, they were returning in some ways to neighbors who had turned them in to begin with. It's not like the war was over and everyone said, I'm no longer prejudiced, now we can all live together. People had the same bigotry that they had before the war, only now they had to live together again. And it seemed impossible to me.
Right. Did you get any of that from your research at the Holocaust Museum, or is that, like, did you any letters or stories?
I mean, there was violence all over Poland. There were several incidents where dozens of people were, where dozens of Jewish families were killed after the war. There were also one of the more poignant small stories that I talk about in the afterword is a boy who, after the war is over, they have finally returned home, and some local men from their town burst in and say, we heard that there were Jews here. And it's obvious that they intend to do violence. And the only way that this family was saved was because this man's little cousin had been sheltered in a Catholic orphanage. She'd been hidden in a Catholic orphanage through the war. And so she is able to recite Catholic prayers and convince these men that they're Christian.
And that's, that happened to my friend's grandparents.
Oh,
happened.
really?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So that was a technique, or, something to get through.
Yeah.
For sure. When do you have time to research? You have a day job, you write at night, so then you research.
And so there's always a research period before I start writing anything. Like I always, there's always like a period of time where like Amazon is arriving at my house every day with a new book that's the book that I'm going to read tonight. So I'm not often doing the research and the reading consecutively. But also, like, I'm not really good at anything else. I don't have any hobbies. I'm not training for a marathon. I'm not like a good cook. So writing is kind of like what I like to do, and pretty much all that I do.
When did you know you wanted to be a writer? Was there a time when, do you remember being a kid or in college, or?
sometimes I still don't know how how it happened. My dad is an English professor, and my mother, when I was from as early as I can remember, would take us on weekly trips to the library, and I'm sure almost everyone who's logged on, all of you book lovers out there have similar stories, but I was really shy and really introverted, and books were just like a window into the world. It was a way of meeting everyone without having to talk to anyone.
Yep, I get it. Somebody's asking for a friend. Somebody named Stuart's asking for a friend. How do you come up with your book titles? For example, the book American Fire. Which is, tell about American Fire is this amazing, amazing book that is nonfiction and reads like a true crime novel.
So I might have an inkling into
who that is.
Who this he it's possible he might be a friend who has suggested several book titles to me in the past. For American Fire, which is a nonfiction book, it's the story of a series of arsons that took place in rural Virginia. It's a true crime novel, but it's also a novel about rural America. It's a very American story. It's about this string of crimes that really only could have happened in this time and this place. I'll also, just to demystify it a little bit, I've written several books and I've only ever gotten to choose the titles of two of them. One was American Fire, and one was They Went Left. And the others are sort of, they're chosen by committee. You might have an idea of what you like, but then your editor has smart thoughts, and then publicists have smart thoughts. And sometimes the thoughts are something as basic as, there's another book coming out the month before yours with the title that's too similar, so we have to come up with something else. So I when I meet young writers, sometimes they'll say things like, I haven't written it yet, but I have the best title. And I just think, oh no, like you can't, if that's what's keeping you going, you can't hang on to that, because that might not be what it's called in the end.
And I will say, American Fire is that's a great book also for teens. I mean, I think that's just I wouldn't limit that as just it's funny, it's on the adult shelf, but I think it's such a great example of storytelling, and the fact that it's nonfiction. I think, a lot of kids are like, I just read fiction or I just read nonfiction. I feel like this is a nice sort of crossover book for people.
Oh, I hope so.
Yeah, I think so for sure. I think that's it for me, but I do want people to hear a little bit more of the book. That's okay?
Yeah.
Sort of just a little bit, because Zofia is this, I think one of the things that we're dancing around is that this book, like your others, has sort of like a central tension, mystery. We don't want to, we've said very much where it opens. Zofia is sort of emerging from the war, this crushed flower who is reaching for the light and step, trying to get to her brother, because they have promised each other that they will find each other at the end of the war. And that is her mission through this book. And so we don't want to, we want everyone to read the book and enjoy it and have that journey with Zofia. But I would like you to read, just to give a sense of her, what page is this, 262. I just want to have people get a little bit more about Zofia's ear and her speech and her coming into herself. And so I want people to hear a little bit more of that. That'd be great.
So as Justine was saying, this story is a mystery, and it's a journey. It's a bit of a quest. Zofia travels across 2 countries, hundreds and hundreds of miles, searching for her brother. And there are a lot of twists and turns along the way, and people who aren't what she expects, and things happen that aren't what she expects. But in the middle of all of this, she also is rediscovering herself and coming into her own a little bit, and learning to move beyond these terrible things that have happened to her. So the piece that Justine, I think, has asked me to read it kind of reflects that. I forgot that pleasure could feel this strong. After years of feeling nothing but perpetual insistent pain, my body had begun to feel like an instrument of it, like it was built to withstand things rather than experience them. And then when the war was over, when I was safely in the hospital, what I mostly felt was numbness, a protective anesthetization against my own feelings. I forgot that I could want something because I wanted it, and not just because I was starving or cold.
Mm. Well, Zofia is just such a marvelous character, and such a great book. Yeah. I think we were going to end there, unless there's anything else you wanted to add. I think, there's Politics and Prose. Back.
No, I wanted to thank you, Justine, and thank you, Politics and Prose, and also all 179 of you who are still logged on. I want to say in a more broad way, we've been talking a lot about social isolation, and I'm in my living room and you're all in your living rooms. I'm really grateful to bookstores right now because I think that books are one of the few ways that we can still be together. We can all be on the same page, even if we're not all in the same room. I know that reading has been my first love, and it's been my most consistent love right now, stuck in my living room. I hope all of you are finding that kind of comfort, if not in books, in something else. And I can't wait to see all of you in person.
Well, thank you for that wonderful exchange. And on that note, what are the books that the both of you are reading right now to get us through this time?
Ooh, go first, Justine. Are you reading anything good?
Two books I just finished, actually both for work, but I did love was one middle grade reader is The List of Things That Will Not Change, by Rebecca Stead. She's a Newbery Medal winner. She wrote When You Reach Me, which is so terrific. And if you want to marry a couple books, if you read A Wrinkle in Time, and then When You Reach Me, that's like a great pairing for having time at home, because A Wrinkle in Time is super crucial to that. But The List of Things That Will Not Change is just so wonderful and so poignant for right now. And I was crying at the end of our interview that we taped today with Rebecca, because we sort of talked about being in a time of change and and trying to hold on to to some things that are certain through uncertainty, and that was great. And then the adult book that I just read that I just loved is The Other Bennett Sister, and it is so good. It's this BBC reporter who, it's her first novel. She's had a long career, and she was enamored or curious about Mary Bennett, the sort of forgotten of the five.
The lamest of all the Bennett sisters. I mean, if we're going to be honest, I'm sure that this book upends those expectations.
Well, really. I have to say, she says, well, she's not going to beauty. Is very all those things you thought about her are true. Mm-hmm. But then she finds, but then she goes to, she does find her way. And it's such a good book. It was just so fun and such a romp. And anyway, so those are my two that I've read most recently.
I was partly asking for your recommendation because I'm halfway through My Dark Vanessa, which my book club is reading, and I'm gonna need a cleansing of the soul when it's done, because it's dark and it's hard. So
The Other Bennett Sister.
Yeah, The Other Bennett Sister. This is what we all need to do. Yeah.
Well, thank you both so much. This was wonderful. And thank you for braving this new platform. We also wanted to thank all of our viewers for joining us tonight. It's their support that's keeping us going during times like this. And we'll hope that you'll continue to shop online with P&P and attend more of our digital events like this one. Just as a reminder, you can click the green button below to purchase your copy of They Went Left or any of Monica's amazing books. And you can click the follow button on your screen at the top to get notifications of other P&P Crowdcasts, and check out our website for updated event listings. And we hope to see you all soon. Be safe, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Monica.